So picture this. I was recently looking at some footage from a massive arms expo in India.
Right.
And the energy was it was palpable.
Yeah.
Gleaming hardware everywhere. You could hear the hum of drones overhead. It was a real spectacle.
I can imagine.
And front and center, there's this Indian official standing next to a mock-up of a new fighter jet, and he is absolutely beaming. I mean, he was practically glowing with pride, gesturing to this aircraft as the ultimate symbol of Atmanirbhar self-reliance.
The big national project.
Exactly. And to him, this machine, it wasn't just metal. It was like the physical proof that India was finally severing the cords of foreign dependency, that they were ready to stand completely alone on the global stage.
Powerful message.
A very powerful message. But then the camera pans, just slightly to the side, and the whole narrative gets complicated. In the shadow of that same display, there's a group of engineers. They're huddled in this quiet, really intense meeting.
Okay.
And when you look closely at their badges, they weren't Indian. They were Japanese.
I see where this is going.
And that single visual, it just created this fascinating, almost jarring paradox. On one side, you have the loud patriotic rhetoric of, we built this, and it's colliding head-on with the quiet reality that the most critical, most sophisticated guts of that machine, we're talking the stealth technology, the engines, they're actually being born in labs in Tokyo.
So the story's a lot more complex than the big banner suggests.
It forces a difficult question, one that I don't think most people are really asking. Is this true self-sufficiency? Or is India simply trading an old addiction to, say, Russian hardware for a new, very high-tech dependency on Japan?
That's the million-dollar question.
And with China watching right next door, is this whole thing a masterstroke of strategy, or is it a contradiction that's just waiting to collapse? And that really is the central question we are tackling today.
It's a huge one.
What does this strategic alignment between two of the Indo-Pacific's major powers truly mean? Especially given the rapid sort of catalytic changes brought on by China's profound growth. We're trying to look beyond the headlines to see if this is genuine synergy or, merely a strategic dependency shuffle driven by external pressure.
And what's so fascinating here is that the defense bond between India and Japan, it isn't happening in a vacuum. Not at all. It's a calculated, you can even say necessary, response to these shifting regional dynamics.
Right.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack the core motivations for both nations. You have India's desperate need for advanced technology and true self-reliance on one side.
And Japan's big shift on the other.
And Japan's post-war turning point on the other. Yeah. We'll look at the specific, highly technical collaborations like this thing called the unicorn system and analyze the broader geopolitical ripple effects. Our goal here is really to use diverse perspectives on strategic necessity, on technological innovation, and critically, on economic reality, to understand how these nations are responding to a dramatically changing balance of power in the Indo-Pacific.
And in doing so, are they creating something new?
I think so. They're constructing a more robust and balanced regional security architecture, one that aims for stability.
So where do we start? To understand the why of this, where's the root?
If we want to understand the why of this partnership, we absolutely have to start with the fundamental driver, the sheer scale and the velocity of the change in the region.
Okay.
We're witnessing what analysts are accurately describing as a gradational change of balance of power.
A gradational change. So not a sudden shock, but a steady, persistent shift.
Precisely. And it's led primarily by the economic and military growth of China. This is an immense strategic challenge, and it demands a complex, tailored, and integrated approach by every regional power.
Why integrated?
Because the traditional structure of superiority, the old way of thinking, is simply no longer viable.
Okay, so let's unpack that using the numbers, because I think they tell the whole story of this divergence. You mention a quantitative shift, and the data I've seen is, frankly, alarming.
It's staggering.
If you just rewind the clock to 2005, which isn't that long ago, Japan and China had almost identical defense spending figures.
They were peers, essentially peer players in terms of budget size and critically in terms of perceived capability.
Right. It was a relatively balanced equation.
Precisely. But the speed of the shift is just unprecedented. If you fast forward just 15 years to 2020, China's military expenditure had already exceeded Japan's by 5.9 times.
5.9 times in just 15 years.
And the projection is even more stark. By 2030, current estimates project that China's expenditure will be 9.5 times larger than Japan's.
Wow.
That trajectory isn't just about spending more money. It signifies a massive, sustained commitment to modernization that fundamentally alters the entire regional equation.
9.5 times the spending power within a 25-year window. That number it's almost paralyzing when you stop and think about the strategic implications.
It is.
And it's not just Japan that feels this pressure, is it? We're seeing this military capability gap widening pretty significantly for India, for South Korea, and for Australia as well, relative to Beijing's investment.
Absolutely. The relevance of this rapid shift is that it systematically negates the historical air and naval superiority that Indo-Pacific neighbors once relied upon.
Particularly the United States and its allies.
Exactly. And this forces every single country to dramatically increase its own defense capabilities and simultaneously seek stronger, more integrated alliances and partnerships.
There's just no other way.
There's simply no single country solution anymore. The math doesn't work.
So what does this massive quantitative shift mean on a strategic level? I mean, beyond the budgets, the outcome is this realization, as you pointed out, that no single country can address this challenge by itself. For Japan, this reality must have hit home pretty powerfully in the mid-2000s.
It did.
Until then, Japan's air and maritime self-defense force could, confidently maintain a qualitative advantage over China's PLA Air Force and Navy.
Yeah.
They had advanced U.S. equipment, specialized training.
They had the edge.
Yeah.
But the pace of erosion was astonishing. By 2018, Japan's own National Defense Program guideline had to address for the very first time a strategic situation where, and I'm quoting, maritime and air superiority becomes untenable.
Untenable? That's a huge admission.
It's a massive admission of strategic reality. It forces a complete systemic overhaul of their defense thinking. It basically means Japan can no longer assume unchallenged control of its surrounding waters or airspace in a major conflict scenario. The game has changed.
And this pressure, it extends beyond just conventional warfare, right? It goes into this crucial realm of what people are calling gray zone challenges.
Yes, and that's a critical concept.
Actions below the threshold of an actual armed conflict.
And the definition of gray zone action is vital here, because it's not just about not firing a shot. These are systematic actions. They're taken by a state actor, often using quasi-military or dual-use assets.
Like Coast Guard vessels.
Exactly. And they are designed to change the status quo without triggering a conventional military response. We see this with China's increasing maritime pressure around the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea.
You're talking about the systematic deployment of these increasingly large and often heavily armed China Coast Guard vessels.
Right.
And they're attempting to change the status quo of territorial sovereignty and administrative control without explicitly using their naval forces.
Exactly. And the strategic impact of that is profound. By using these dual-use assets, China creates ambiguity.
Ambiguity about attribution, about response.
Exactly, about response thresholds. If India or Japan respond with high-end military assets, a destroyer, say to a quasi-law enforcement vessel, they risk being seen as the escalatory power.
The one who overreacted.
Precisely. And this lack of clarity is exactly what makes the gray zone so effective. It wears down the defensive posture of neighbors over time. It's a slow, grinding pressure.
So this kind of systemic pressure, it forces countries like India and Japan to seek not just theoretical cooperation, but deeply coordinated defense strategies.
Yes, strategies that span everything from law enforcement activities all the way up to joint naval operations, the whole spectrum.
Let's transition then to India's motivations, because their urgency for modernization and diversification has been brutally contextualized by recent events.
Absolutely.
I mean, we can't forget the 2020 Galwan Valley clash and the continuous volatility along the line of actual control. That violence really underscored India's desperate need to bolster its defenses, and quickly, against a major power.
And then you have to layer on the complex dynamics of the two-front challenge.
Right.
China isn't just a concern on its own. Its deepening military ties with Pakistan are a compounding problem that demands immense resources from India.
So you see this through major cooperation projects like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which provides strategic access.
And the supply of cutting-edge hardware.
Yeah.
Think about the JF-17 Thunderjets, which are a joint production effort.
Right.
And the transfer of submarines, which significantly bolsters Pakistan's naval capability. All of this puts pressure on New Delhi.
So India's response to this strategic, I guess you could call it encirclement, has been classic diversification.
It has.
They're acquiring cutting-edge technology from multiple global partners to avoid dependence on any single source, especially Moscow, their legacy supplier.
Yeah, that's key.
We see S-400 missile defense systems from Russia, Rafale jets from France, Apache helicopters from the U.S., advanced drones from Israel. It's an expensive, high-stakes shopping spree designed to build resilience and redundancy.
And this internal anxiety, combined with the external pressure, leads directly to what we can call the pursuit of dignity and domestic excellence, which is symbolized by Atmanirbhar.
The self-reliance drive.
Exactly. I was really struck by a story I read about a man named Vikram. He's a mid-level defense contractor in Bengaluru.
Okay.
And his company has historically relied on managing logistics for Russian parts. Steady but kind of uninspired work. We're calling this his vendor's epiphany.
The vendor's epiphany. I like that. So what was the specific catalyst? What made Vikram, and by extension the wider Indian defense establishment, finally realize that relying on Moscow just wasn't viable anymore?
It was a realization of diminishing returns and really a profound strategic vulnerability. The story goes that Vikram walked past the stalls at an expo showcasing China's indigenous defense sector.
So he saw it with his own eyes.
He saw their self-developed fifth-generation fighters, their AI-driven drones, and he felt this mix of anxiety and profound inspiration. He saw a neighbor achieving what India had only aspired to do for decades.
And the penny drops.
The realization hit him that Russia, which is bogged down in its own conflicts and facing severe sanctions, could no longer guarantee the supply chain or the quality control or, critically, access to the true next generation of military technology.
So relying on Moscow was becoming a strategic dead end.
An absolute dead end. The external competitive pressure from China's successful indigenous sector acted as a massive forcing mechanism. It pivoted India's entire outlook away from reliance on legacy suppliers and toward building its own competence.
That makes so much sense.
So the motivation for the Make in India initiative, especially in defense, isn't just about cost-effective logistics anymore. It's driven by national dignity, by the desire for true sovereignty.
The idea that you're a creator, not just a customer.
Precisely. The idea that sovereignty comes from self-reliance, not from being a perpetual client, is gaining huge traction. And this shift, catalyzed by China's impressive advancements in its own defense sector, is fostering a genuinely multipolar defense development landscape. You have multiple nations now racing to establish their own ecosystems of excellence.
But that pursuit of dignity, it hits a very tough, very practical roadblock, doesn't it? The R&D and absorption challenge.
It does.
True self-reliance requires mastering technology absorption, AOT, not just mere assembly, which is transfer of technology, 2T. Can India really bridge that gap when you look at their track record?
That distinction is absolutely critical, and we have to be realistic here. You can license the final assembly of a fighter jet.
Sure.
But unless you can design and mass-produce the next generation engine or the advanced radar components, you aren't truly self-reliant. You're just a sophisticated kit builder.
And the data reflects this difficulty, right?
It does. India's R&D spending as a percentage of GDP remains lower compared to other major players in the region, particularly China and South Korea. And that severely hinders the creation of genuine indigenous self-reliance capabilities.
And when we talk about fragmentation, we have to acknowledge past domestic project failures. We're not talking about small mistakes here. We're talking about massive, long-running programs like the Arjun tank or the Tejas-like combat aircraft.
And these are such essential historical lessons. The Arjun tank project, for instance, became notorious for its prolonged development time, its excessive weight, and persistent engine performance issues.
And the end result?
The end result was a high cost and very limited deployment. Similarly, the Tejas LCA project suffered from decades of delays.
And it still required significant foreign assistance for its most critical components.
Its engine, particularly. The common theme in both was fragmented efforts across different defense laboratories and public sector undertakings. There was insufficient coordination and not enough integration of private sector expertise.
So, without a more unified strategic approach, streamlined regulations, greater support for smaller companies, MSMEs, and really effective collaboration between the DRDO, public sector units, and the private sector, all the international partnerships in the world won't bridge that final gap to strategic autonomy.
That's the core of it. It's an internal problem, not just an external one.
Okay, so let's flip the coin and look at Japan, because their shift in defense policy is just as fundamental as India's push for self-reliance.
It really is. This is Japan's Zeitenwende, their turning point, which accelerated significantly after 2022.
And the documents from that period, the National Security Strategy and National Defense Strategy, adopted in December 2022.
They represent the most revolutionary change in Japan's post-war foreign and security policy. It's a fundamental reshaping of their entire defense posture.
It's a foundational reorientation away from those post-war constraints. And the major, tangible goal is this decision to effectively double the defense budget to approximately 2% of GDP by 2027. That aligns Japan's spending with NATO benchmarks. It signals a major political determination to reinforce its own defense, moving from, pure minimalism to a more robust deterrence.
And that determination is driven by a deep-seated realization about the inadequacy of their current posture.
Inadequacy against what specifically?
Against the speed and scale of China's and North Korea's missile developments. Prime Minister Kishida himself implicitly acknowledged that the self-defense forces were, and I quote, not adequate to deter or defend the country based on realistic simulations of current threats.
Wow. For a prime minister to say that?
It's a huge statement, and it led directly to the push for counterstrike capability.
That is a massive strategic shift, moving away from a purely defensive posturing. Can we delve into that, the counterstrike capability? Because it feels like it really pushes the boundaries of Japan's post-war constitutional restrictions.
It does, and it required some very careful political wording. The fundamental reason for acquiring it is the realization that missile defense alone cannot adequately protect the country.
Just not enough.
China and North Korea possess vast arsenals. China, for instance, has over 300 cruise missiles and more than 1,000 ballistic missiles. That's enough to potentially saturate Japan's existing anti-missile defense system.
So the counterstrike capability is essentially intended to enhance deterrence by threatening retaliation against the launch sites themselves.
That's the primary political framing.
Yeah.
Deterrence. The capability is presented as a measure to prevent further attacks.
But there is an underlying ambiguity here, right? This is where the constitutional question comes in.
It is. It implicitly suggests damage limitation, the ability to strike back at the launch origins after a first attack has already been suffered. The National Security Strategy states it aims to strike back at the launch origins to prevent further attacks, which clearly implies that Japan presupposes its opponent will have launched the initial strike.
But wait, doesn't damage limitation implicitly require absorbing a first strike, which seems politically risky for Japan's constitutional constraints? How do they square that circle internally?
It's a semantic and strategic tightrope walk. They argue it's a purely defensive capability because it's only employed when Japan is under attack and its very survival is threatened.
But to do that,
But granting themselves the capacity to hit distant targets requires a massive upgrade in missile technology and intelligence gathering, all of which were historically off-limits. This subtle but critical shift in strategic calculus is what forces Japan to seek more capable and technologically advanced defense partners.
And this brings us right back to why Japan needs India.
Exactly.
Moving beyond its primary indispensable alliance with the U.S., Japan recognizes it cannot face the sheer scale of regional challenges alone. Strong, diversified partnerships are now essential to maintain the region's stability.
And India is indispensable because of its sheer scale, its geography, and its growing military power. Strengthening ties with Delhi is critical, particularly for maintaining sea lane security in the Indian Ocean, which is absolutely vital for Japan's energy supply.
And it's not just India.
No, this aligns with Japan's broader strategy of advancing bilateral ties with other U.S. allies like Australia and the U.K., and leading major multilateral technological projects like the Global Combat Air Program with the U.K. and Italy.
And this necessity is felt personally inside the Japanese defense community. There's the perspective of Kenji, a senior naval engineer in Yokosuka. We're calling this his engineer's horizon. For decades, his world was defined by American standards and Japanese precision. But as China's naval modernization accelerated with its indigenous carriers and stealth-capable destroyers, he saw the waters getting crowded and that technology gap closing really, really fast.
And Kenji realized that China's advancements weren't just a threat. They were a massive catalyst. They were forcing Japan to break free from its historically closed, almost insular defense ecosystem.
How so?
During early discussions about co-developing this unicorn stealth antenna system with India, he noted the stark cultural and procedural gaps between Japan's hardware masters and the young Indian software architects.
Culture clash.
A productive one, though. Japan had the legacy of high-end manufacturing precision, the metallurgy, the specialized machinery, but their processes were slow. They were bureaucratic.
And India brought that hunger and agility, right?
Right, exactly. Kenji realized that while Japan had the precision, its defense technology lacked the software agility and the AI integration that India could offer.
Yeah.
The partnership wasn't just about diplomacy. It was a cold, hard technological necessity.
So to keep up, they had to team up.
To maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific by pooling resources, they had to combine Japan's hardware excellence with India's brilliant, sometimes chaotic, yet incredibly rapid software innovation.
And that really highlights the true nature of this balancing act. China's significant strategic investments are, in effect, forcing established powers to break down old technological silos and innovate through these new partnerships.
And this is key to fostering a more robust and balanced regional security architecture, one that ultimately benefits everyone involved in maintaining stability.
Okay, so that brings us to the really concrete cooperation that's already underway. We're past the handshakes and joint military exercises now. They are formalizing the relationship.
They are.
The establishment of this new defense consultation framework is a significant step. It puts the partnership on a structured operational footing that allows for real technology sharing.
And the most tangible proof of that deep trust in technology sharing is the co-development project they call the Unicorn System.
Okay, the Unicorn System.
This is so much more than a simple transaction. It's a sophisticated technology fusion project.
So what exactly is the Unicorn System, technically speaking? It sounds mythical, but it's clearly a high-value asset.
Well, essentially, it's a high-tech, integrated mass structure. You could think of it as a mask for ships.
A mask for ships, okay.
It's designed to consolidate a whole suite of communication and sensor systems. We're talking multiple radar antennas, electronic warfare gear, into one single streamlined structure.
And the innovation is getting it all to fit.
The core innovation is achieving that integration without compromising the ship's low observability or its stealth profile.
So it's about sensor fusion and survivability. It takes all the disparate eyes and ears of the ship and wraps them into one single stealth package.
Precisely. The goal is twofold. First, improve survivability because it drastically reduces the ship's radar cross-section. Second, enhanced operational effectiveness by boosting secure communication bandwidth and real-time sensor fusion.
That sounds incredibly complex.
It is. The system leverages phased array technology, which is notoriously difficult to integrate successfully onto a single mass structure without creating electromagnetic interference or, signal degradation. This requires extremely high precision in material science and engineering.
Which is critical, sensitive technology transfer. And given that IP protection is always a massive sticking point in these deals, how are they managing the sharing of this proprietary knowledge?
This is where the trust level is really evident. The system is based on technology that's already utilized on Japan's advanced Mogami-class frigates.
So it's proven tech.
Proven, high-end tech. On the Indian side, you have a company called Four-Shroud Electronics, working closely with Japanese companies like Yokohama Rubber, NEC, and Sampo Kogyo. This isn't just joint assembly, it's co-development.
So they're in the lab together.
They are. It's rooted in sharing design philosophies and manufacturing secrets for highly sensitive sensor technology. They're navigating the IP concerns by defining very clear roles and compartmentalizing development, ensuring it's a mutual benefit.
So beyond the Unicorn System, the future technological synergies are, as you said, high stakes, and none are higher than engine technology. This is truly a potential game changer for India.
It is the ultimate challenge for any defense industry, as we discussed earlier. Engine technology is just notoriously difficult to develop domestically. It requires decades of iterative failure to master the complex thermal management and turbine blade metallurgy.
The real crown jewels.
They are. So if Japan agrees to export or co-develop engine technology, even in specific component areas, it could significantly accelerate India's AMCA fifth-generation fighter project, which is absolutely central to India's self-reliance ambition.
And the partnership becomes so potent because of this blending of expertise. You have India's world-class IT, software, and AI skills meeting Japan's precision engineering, robotics, and advanced manufacturing capabilities.
That is the technological cocktail everyone wants to create. Imagine combining India's ability to rapidly deploy innovative software solutions, think in sensor fusion algorithms, autonomous mission management, with Japan's expertise in specialized materials and miniaturized robotics. That integration is where genuine breakthroughs in areas like fully autonomous systems, advanced cyber defense, and high-performance materials can happen. It allows them to leapfrog current technological generations being fielded by competitors.
And finally, there are the less glamorous but absolutely essential areas, MRO and logistics, maintenance, repair, and overhaul.
Right. And cooperating on MRO for existing equipment is vital for operational readiness. India operates a hugely diversified military. They have systems from Russia, the US, France, Israel.
A logistical nightmare.
A massive challenge. Ensuring a robust logistics chain and high readiness rates for this diverse fleet is a huge undertaking. So cooperation here ensures that Indian assets have access to high-precision Japanese parts and maintenance expertise, which secures operational effectiveness across the board and, again, further reduces reliance on legacy suppliers.
Okay, so now we have to look across the way and discuss the blueprint that is, in many ways, driving so much of this urgency and innovation, China's innovation ecosystem. And it's anchored by the strategy of military-civil fusion, or MCF.
Yes, and MCF is one of the CCP's top strategic priorities. It has an explicit goal of achieving complete military modernization by 2035 and becoming a world-class military by 2049.
And the objective?
The objective is clear: to systematically leverage China's exponentially expanding civilian R&D base in AI, biotech, materials science for military modernization. It's about promoting dual-use technology and institutionalizing two-way technology transfer between the sectors.
You mentioned the old Soviet model before. What were the tangible inefficiencies within the PLA's historical acquisition system that MCF was designed specifically to dismantle?
Well, historically, the PLA's weapon development was rooted in that old Soviet model. It was characterized by large, often siloed, state-owned monopolies, SOEs.
Okay.
And these monopolies suffered from bureaucratic inefficiency, a lack of competitive pressure, and frankly, corruption. MCF was initiated to overcome these institutional weaknesses by introducing market forces and private sector speed into the defense acquisition process.
So it's seen as the key.
It's viewed as the essential mechanism to achieve breakthroughs in efficiency and innovation by integrating that dynamic civilian sector.
And is it working? Are we seeing a measurable impact?
We are. We're seeing it in innovation, drivers, and outcomes. MCF has actively pushed large state-owned enterprises to be more efficient. The data on patent productivity is very revealing.
Go on.
The average yearly patent output for these SOEs tripled between 2012 and 2022. It jumped from 54 to 166.
Sir Bold.
And critically, this improved productivity was coupled with a simultaneous reduction in average staff headcounts, down from over 6,800 people to under 4,900.
That suggests the strategy is successfully forcing efficiency and trimming bureaucratic fat, which is the exact opposite of the fragmentation we saw in some of India's legacy projects.
It is.
Let's look at a specific example. AEC Aviation Power. They're the domestic leader in aviation engines. Why were aero engines China's major historical weakness, and how is MCF fixing that?
Well, aero engines were historically a massive weakness because the difficulty of mastering turbine blade technology, which has to operate under extreme temperature and stress, is phenomenal. It requires decades of specialized materials science and precision manufacturing. It's a technological hurdle only a handful of nations have truly cleared.
And AECC-AP?
They are a prime example of an SOE aligning its objectives directly with national priorities to overcome this. They are streamlining their core business, they're liquidating non-core subsidiaries, and they're receiving massive state backing. It amounted to 334 million RMB in 2022 alone.
All focused on one goal.
All focused on catching up with international leaders in engine manufacturing.
The other key component of MCF is encouraging private sector involvement. This shift has created new opportunities, right? 46 private firms have been listed since 2012, compared to just 12 SOEs.
And these private firms show a significantly higher R&D intensity compared to the large SOEs. They're pouring a higher percentage of their revenue back into R&D, which suggests a more focused, innovation-driven approach, even if they're operating on a smaller scale. They are the fast-moving element of the fusion strategy.
Guangqi Technologies, KCT, is a great case study for how a private firm can leverage this fusion strategy for massive military impact.
KCT is a fascinating example. They're a private firm focusing on metamaterials,
Which are
engineered materials with unique properties, most notably superior stealth capabilities. They leveraged a first-mover advantage, positioning themselves at the forefront of this crucial strategic technology.
And now
KCT now supplies major defense SOEs. They're directly contributing to enhanced stealth capabilities, such as those used in the J-20 jet fighter. The fusion allows a nimble private firm to scale up a niche technology that is indispensable to the major weapon platform assemblers. It perfectly illustrates the success of MCF in pulling in outside innovation.
But despite the successes of MCF, there's a necessary balance we need to introduce here. This is not a perfectly level playing field, even with this push for efficiency and private involvement.
That's right. The SOEs maintain substantial, persistent advantages. They receive significantly more government subsidies on average, and there's a much stronger correlation between their R&D proximity and their patent output.
They're just better connected.
They were simply better integrated into the national innovation system. Private firms like KCT tend to act as high-tech suppliers to the large SOEs. They supply the stealth tech, but they are not direct competitors in assembling the major weapon platforms. The strategic core remains centralized and state-backed.
So this inherent structure highlights that while China's military-civil fusion strategy has driven efficiency and encouraged impressive private enterprise, the sheer scale of investment driven by this strategy is the primary catalyst.
Exactly. It's forcing these strategic reckonings across the region, pushing Japan and India to forge these deeper technical partnerships.
All right, let's shift our gaze entirely and consider what actually glues the region together, despite all these rising military tensions: the economic anchor. We return now to the Asian paradox, this coexistence of deepening economic interdependence and these lingering security rivalries.
And this paradox is profound. It has to be the context for all of these defense discussions. I mean, consider the sheer scale of the economic ties. China, South Korea, and Japan alone account for approximately 23% of global GDP.
23%.
Just those three. And intra-regional trade between East Asian countries has reached an astonishing 55% of the total global trade volume. The commercial arteries are just so deeply entwined, you cannot talk about separating these defense strategies from the economic reality they exist within.
To make this real, let's share the anecdote of Sarah, a logistics manager in Chennai, India. We're calling this the container at the dock story. Her daily reality is a perfect visualization of this paradox.
Sarah manages two conflicting realities simultaneously. On one computer screen, she's tracking Japanese defense delegations and semiconductor supply chains that are meant to de-risk India from reliance on China.
Okay.
But on her dock, right outside her window, she's actively offloading thousands of containers arriving from Shenzhen and Shanghai.
And what's in them?
Everything. Raw materials, consumer electronics, and critically active pharmaceutical ingredients or APIs that keep India's entire economy running.
So you have to admire Sarah's professionalism, right? She's managing a potential security threat and a crucial trade invoice for the same entity every single day. What's the tangible implication of this deep reliance?
The implication is stark. Despite the heated rhetoric, despite the formation of defense alliances, the commercial arteries are still pumping at full capacity. The economic cost of severing these deep ties, a hypothetical scenario that gets discussed in geopolitical circles all the time.
The decoupling idea.
Exactly. It would be catastrophic for India, for Japan, and for China itself. Yeah. China relies heavily on Japanese high-end components and machinery. India relies on Chinese electronics and raw materials. These dependencies are chains that bind everyone together.
This deep economic reliance, therefore, acts as a massive stabilizing anchor in the region.
It does.
Which suggests that defense cooperation, like the India-Japan partnership, is less about preparing for some inevitable war and maybe more about creating a regional stalemate or a balanced security architecture.
I think that's a great way to put it.
This balance is designed to allow business and economic prosperity to continue uninterrupted, acknowledging that at the end of the day, stability is paramount for commerce.
Absolutely. But even with all this synergy and strategic necessity, the path forward is full of hurdles, especially when you're dealing with high-tech alliances and the goal of true autonomy.
It's never easy.
Managing expectations and risk in these high-tech defense collaborations is historically tricky. The fundamental issues of intellectual property rights and trust are incredibly complex, particularly regarding the transfer of sensitive technology like jet engines. Nations naturally want to protect their crown jewels.
We only have to look back at the failed Shinmewa US-2I aircraft deal between India and Japan as a painful reminder of the complexities inherent in these agreements. This was supposed to be a massive commercial and defense victory for both sides.
And that failure is such a crucial lesson. The US-2I deal, concerning a unique amphibious aircraft, dragged on for years before it finally collapsed.
What went wrong?
The issues were numerous. The huge investment cost was prohibitive for India. There were concerns about technology transfer limitations. And critically, both national security concerns and domestic industrial interests intervened on both sides.
So Japan was hesitant.
Japan was reluctant to fully share the most critical proprietary technologies needed for true indigenous production, and India felt the final price was just too high for what was, essentially, a limited transfer of technology. It was a failure of expectations management and IP negotiation.
And those lessons have to be integrated into current projects like the Unicorn system.
Yeah, absolutely must be.
And Japan's strategic shift, this idea of doubling its defense spending, it faces significant internal challenges too. The bold goal of reaching a 2% defense budget target is complicated by some severe financial constraints.
Absolutely. Japan's public debt is already at 260% of GDP.
260%.
So financing such a sustained increase in defense spending without triggering a massive fiscal crisis or diverting funds from other critical areas, like Social Security, is a daunting task. The political willpower to maintain this increase is constantly being tested by economic reality.
And beyond the money, there's the human capital issue. Japan's self-defense forces are having a really hard time recruiting personnel, which makes the announced increase in power difficult to sustain. Why is recruitment so challenging there?
It ties back to demographics and culture. Japan is facing rapid population aging, which means the pool of young people available for military service is shrinking every year.
Okay.
Furthermore, there remains a deep-seated cultural resistance to military service in the post-war era. And the SDF is having difficulty competing with the private sector for the specialized, highly skilled talent they need for cyber issues and advanced systems management.
So even if the budget is doubled,
they cannot staff the increased capacity if the recruits simply aren't there.
This brings us back to the crucial distinction for India. They have to move beyond just securing Japan as an alternative supplier to truly achieving strategic autonomy.
Yes.
Because replacing reliance on Moscow with reliance on Tokyo doesn't fundamentally fulfill the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, does it?
It doesn't. It is the difference between diversification and genuine autonomy. And to achieve that true autonomy, two things are non-negotiable. First, sustained, massive investment in a robust domestic R&D ecosystem is essential to bridge that capability gap we discussed earlier.
You can't outsource the core science.
You cannot outsource the fundamental science behind stealth materials or engine metallurgy. You have to own it.
And
Second, there must be a genuine, transformative change in mindset within the large state-owned defense companies in India. They have to embrace efficiency, innovation, and real collaboration with the private sector.
Learning from the systematic approach of China's MCF strategy.
Exactly. They have to learn how to overcome that bureaucratic inertia. The historical baggage of fragmentation, of bureaucratic delays that we saw in past projects has to be shed for this new collaborative paradigm to actually work.
So this deep dive has shown us a really complex, fascinating convergence. The India-Japan defense relationship is a significant strategic alignment. It's driven fundamentally by the necessity of regional security balancing, with China's rapid, comprehensive modernization acting as a powerful catalyst. And it's driven by mutual technological benefits, combining Japan's hardware precision with India's software agility.
And the ultimate synthesis, I think, is that self-reliance in the 21st century defense world is clearly not about isolation. It's not about building a wall around yourself.
Right.
Instead, it is a complex balancing act where partnership, like the one being forged with Japan, is used as a critical stepping stone.
Yeah.
It's a catalyst to build genuinely indigenous capabilities. But that path inherently comes with its own set of unique opportunities and, yes, complex new dependencies.
It's not a simple fix.
It's not. And given the deep and stabilizing economic ties between China, India, and Japan, the reality that Sarah sees every single day at the dock, the security architecture that emerges, is one where economic dependence becomes perhaps the most powerful form of mutual deterrence.